Heading back to Kalos, if you look at the upper right corner of the Paldea region map, you notice a cloud barrier. It seems that there's a very clear land formation that heads north. Now, given that Paldea is based off of Spain and Kalos is based off of France, it would seem likely that heading back to Kalos is a possibility at least. But I don't want to speculate too much on that because really there's going to be no way to know until the games come out, and I'm sure if Kalos is in the game, we won't know until we actually get to play it as a nice little post-game surprise. Huge post-game surprise, but the connections to Kalos run so much deeper. In fact, they run to the very heart of the Paldea region. In fact, the topic of today's discussion has been messaged to me by so many of you on Twitter and in the comments. I thought it when I first saw it. So many other YouTubers have talked about it. There is something going on with this Paldea region map that definitely ties us to the Kalos region. So let me explain. But first, I want to talk about this school, the academy that you'll start the game off at. Now, this place is said to be the oldest school in the entire Pokemon region, and I thought that that was an interesting detail for them to include on the Scarlet and Violet website. It's the oldest school in the region. Are there other schools in the region? In fact, what buildings would be older in this region? If you think about the design of cities, typically they tend to revolve around one big central building, of which this is the biggest building in the entire city that it's part of, and they tend to spread outwards. And you can see that design very clearly here in the central hub city of the region. The school seems to be pretty much the city's heart, and then there's a plaza down below it, and then everything else spreads outwards from that school. Meaning that school likely isn't just the oldest school in the region, but is in fact the oldest building in the whole region. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of history there, and in fact I think the Pokemon website says as much. Now this city is called Mesagoza City, and it sits at the heart of the region. According to the Pokemon website, it really is the center of Paldea, even though we know that the center is actually this giant hole, this chasm. We'll come back to that. When I look to the other cities of the Paldea region, I see that they are all much smaller towns and cities than this central one, likely more modern. The older a city is, the more likely it is that it's been built out and that it's bigger. But on top of all of that, just look at the architecture. It's all modern and sleek, lots of fresh buildings. All of the gym towers look exactly the same. Mesagoza is the oldest city in the entire Paldea region. And that's interesting because surely this region has history. Surely there's a past to it. I mean, what happened to all the old past cities? What about any ruins or relics? The Galar region is covered with ancient stones and sites that seem peculiar and ancient, but not here, not in Paldea. Well, there are. Dotted around the map, there are what appears to be watchtowers that you'll explore throughout your adventure. These watchtowers are buried in the earth. They are uneven and sunken into the various environments in which they stand. They remind you a lot of the Sheikah's towers from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and from these towers you could look out and what? See? Well, what is a watchtower even for? Well, typically you have watchtowers to watch out for anything coming towards, well, whatever they're guarding. And they are plotted all around the outside circle, the perimeter of the region, which means they were set there to dedicate, to watch, to keep eyes out from anything approaching the center of the region. And at the center of the region, a crater. Why would you need to protect a crater at the heart of the region? Oh, wait. What if this crater wasn't always a crater? What if there was something there before? It doesn't look very natural when you see this crater here at the heart of the region. It reminds you a lot of Sootopolis City in the Hoenn region. That isn't a natural crater either. It was formed when a meteorite fell from space and landed in what is now the Cave of Origin. That meteorite then created the room that people could come in and fill in the crater and create the city. But what if the city was already there? It would have been destroyed. The architecture of these towers and of the school are maybe the oldest in the entire region. What if that architecture belongs not to the modern Paldea region, but in fact to an ancient past version of the region that existed where there was a giant city in the middle? What if those ancient watchtowers were once protecting a city at the heart of the Paldea region, the only part of which remains is the school, the rest of it completely destroyed? How would that be possible? A meteorite, maybe? Meteorites are pretty common in the Pokemon world, but I think a lot of you know where I'm going because I mentioned Kalos at the beginning of this video. North of the Paldea region is the Kalos region, and most of you know that 3,000 years ago there was a great war in Kalos. No one really knew who between, just that AZ's army fought on one side, and after his Floette fell, he created a weapon. The ultimate weapon. 3,000 years ago, he fired it into the sky and it came crashing back down. And we know from the animated versions of this story that we've seen that it did in fact level an ancient looking city, completely destroyed. But there's no relics of this in the Kalos region. I don't think that it came down and landed back on Kalos. It must have hit somewhere else. Over the years, there's been a lot of speculation as to what happened when the ultimate weapon fired. Did it irradiate a meteorite, creating Deoxys in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire? Or did it land in the Galar region, striking Eternatus and causing the darkest day 3,000 years ago? Any of these things are possible. 3,000 years ago is also a special date because it's the disappearance of the last Melmetal. Did that have anything to do with anything? I don't know. But much like Sutopolis City, which is formed inside of a crater that looks a lot like the crater at the heart of Paldea, it would seem to be the case that perhaps this was the landing zone, this was the blast site, this was ground zero for the ultimate weapon when it fired. Do we have any evidence for that? Sure we do. First of all, we've got the phenomenon of the Paldea region, terastallization, crystalline structures around Pokemon. The ultimate weapon is not only made of a giant crystal-like structure, but when it fired, it irradiated regular evolution stones, turning them into mega stones, changing the way that their crystal structures worked. One of the other common theories is that in the Kalos region, there is a mythical Pokemon known as Diancie, created when a Carbink mutated, perhaps struck when the ultimate weapon went off, and it irradiated and transformed into Diancie, a giant Pokemon with a crystal crown. Similarly, this life force, this energy of Pokemon that was fired by the ultimate weapon has been attributed to have expressed itself throughout the generations since then. In a previous video, which by the way, I'm so glad so many of you are liking, the one that I did on terastallization the other day. In a previous video, obviously we talked about how like Necrozma and Eternatus and the G-Max energy and the Z-Crystal energy, it's all very, very similar. And once again, we have terastallization where we have that same energy powering up Pokemon and giving them this crystal-like form. My suspicion is this is the direct result of the landing zone of the firing of the weapon. Now, it is said in Pokemon X and Y that the firing of that weapon ended the war, and you could certainly see that. If there was once a city in the middle of the region and the blast was so big that it not only leveled the city, but formed a giant crater at the heart of the region, wiping out almost every single building and every single settlement that existed at that age, the watchtowers were certainly very, very pointless. They would have watched as a giant blast came from the sky and wiped out the region. But there was just that one building just off the center of the region, the school that was old enough, harboring some people who would eventually repopulate and fill out the region, creating new modern cities and modern towns. That is what I think happened in the Paldea region 3,000 years ago, and I expect to find more evidence of this as we learn more about the games, and of course, as I play them. Let me know what you think in the comments below. A huge thank you to those of you who are supporting me on Patreon. It genuinely means the world. I know I took some time off last month. I'm hoping that the amount of videos at the moment more than makes up for it. So just thank you for the support and allowing me to work in the way that is the healthiest and best for me. And I will see you later. So hi, Pokemon Masters.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master!
As always, a massive thank you to those of you who support this channel on Patreon. You make this channel possible, and a special thank you to the big patrons of this month, the Elgator, Jed Rubin, and Michael Hornshoe. Thank you.